friends. Hi, Dennis, just got in. Really appreciate y'all spending this hour with us on this, what we think is a really important topic and what we're seeing in the chat too. Just by way of introduction, I'm Deepti Doshi and I co-lead New Public with Eli Pariser and come to this work after spending almost a decade working with thousands of group admins all over the world at Meta when we had actually centered groups and community building as a part of the product experience. As I mentioned, I co-lead New Public with Eli, who many of you know wrote the book The Filter Bubble and has been building innovations at the intersection of democracy and technology for decades. And we're also joined with Talia Stroud, one of the co-founders of New Public also, and a path-breaking researcher on social media and communication at the Center for Media Engagement at UT Austin. It's her insight, a lot of her research that's been critical to the founding of New Public. And so really excited to kind of be able to share this new body of work with all of you. As many of y'all know, it's been for over a year now that we've really been focusing in on local digital spaces. These are the digital surfaces like Facebook groups, next door neighborhoods, maybe even some of our WhatsApp group chats, where we connect with our neighbors and understand what's happening in the towns that we live in. And today we're going to share some brand new, exciting research from these spaces. Talia has helped us field a nationwide poll, and we now have a robust, unique data set with some really actionable insights, which she's going to share with you. And then after that, Eli is going to join Talia to chat about what we're learning from this work, why it's so important, and how all of us can start kind of putting it into action. And I'm really excited that we have a surprise for y'all. Our founder and resident, Trey Brundrett, is here to unveil details about our new project that we actually haven't been able to share publicly. We haven't shared publicly to date about this new product that's just about to begin its closed beta testing. So it's a really exciting moment for us. And again, while I'm on this Zoom screen, I'm seeing the chat populate. I'm seeing the number of people kind of continue to increase and just really appreciate y'all being here for this. I'm about to pass it over to Talia. But, for those of you who may be new to us, I want to give you just a quick introduction about New Public. So New Public is a nonpartisan, nonprofit product studio focused on reimagining community, connection, and conversation online. We see ourselves combining research and design and product development to create healthier communities, spaces that serve our democracy, not, division and distraction that we see on some of the mainstream commercial platforms. And our belief is that just like public parks, libraries, serve as our offline infrastructure for our civic life, for our community life. We think that this digital era that we're in right now requires a new kind of public infrastructure. So I'm, again, really excited that y'all are here as we begin to put years of research and experimentation and idea generation into our own products and tools out into the world. And yeah, we'll just, reinforce that we continue to need your help as, so many of you, as I see the names populate, have been part of our journey over these past few years. And especially for those of you who are new, we are going to continue to need your help, your partnership, your ideas. So whether you're a funder, a thought partner, or even somebody who's living in your neighborhood wanting to step up into this role of stewardship, we feel really honored to be in this with y'all and eager to get started. So the only thing, though, between me and Talia is a little bit of housekeeping. You should feel free to share anything it is that you hear today and quote any of the speakers. We'll be emailing you, for those of you who've been to New Public gatherings in the past, we'll email you kind of some of the takeaways it is that we gathered from this conversation, and you should feel free to share that as well as the recording of the session. We want this to be an active conversation. So Talia is going to share the research and the insights. Her and Eli are going to get into conversation, but the questions that come in through the chat are really going to inform Eli's discussion with Talia, and we hope to kind of be able to engage with them. So please, please, as you have questions, put them in the chat, and we'll be organizing them. So without further ado, here is Talia Stroud.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And such a pleasure to be here today with all of you. Let me share my screen here so that we can start to chat about some of the research that we've been doing. Okay. Can folks see the screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so today we're going to share some survey research that we did about what we're calling the local connection crisis and providing data on what communities need from local digital spaces. Just by way of background here, I'm Talia Stroud. You've already heard about me. This is a project that's a collaboration between New Public and the Center for Media Engagement at the University of Texas at Austin. And you're going to get to hear more about the local lab project later in this presentation. As we get underway here, just as a starting point, what we're really looking to understand is which local digital spaces are used by whom, how are they used and perceived, and how do people really feel about their local community in relationship to these digital spaces? Now, how did we do this? Just to begin, we surveyed people in 3 different areas. So first, we surveyed 506 people living in suburban areas, 502 people living in urban areas, and 1,020 people living in what we're calling mixed or rural regions. And by that, what we mean is it's either people who are in rural regions or they're in more urban or suburban areas, but right next to these rural regions that are sometimes underrepresented. And so we wanted to make sure that we surveyed all of these areas to get a more diverse representation of how people feel about digital spaces. One just technical note, the suburban and urban areas were probability samples, so you're able to compare those two. The mixed and rural regions was not a probability sample, so just use a bit of caution in comparing those. With that said, I'll already preview that the results across these 3 tend to be relatively consistent, which was a surprising part of this research. So overall takeaways, let's just start with what we're going to share to give you an overview. So first, people already value and use their local digital spaces, but there's lots of evidence that they could be better. And there's some hint here that perhaps community stewards could be the key. More on that momentarily. Second takeaway is there's an interest gap between what people are getting from their local digital spaces and what they want. And this, I think, offers a lot of opportunity. And then third, we looked into why people actually leave local digital spaces, and the reasons are myriad, but some include toxicity or their feeling of being annoyed or overwhelmed. So more on that in a moment. So let's dive in. So the first part of this talk is we really wanted to share kind of a baseline. So where are people? How and why do people use digital platforms to connect locally? And so the status quo of local digital spaces is that people already value and use these local spaces, but they're interested in using them for a variety of ways, including connecting with others and staying informed. And we'll get into more of the weeds in that as we go through. So the first thing we wanted to know is where are people connecting to their local area online? And as you can see from the chart here, Facebook is a really important player in this space. So it is the most popular place where people are connecting with others in their local digital area. It's named by over 60% of people and nearly 70, whether we're talking about suburban, urban, or mixed rural areas. Facebook is where they're going to connect with people in their local area. Next most common is group text messages or Instagram. And then a bit lower than that, email list next door. And then you see others are less popular. So when people are going to connect in their local area, these are the platforms that they're using. But we wanted to know how often are people actually going to these spaces? And so for everyone that said we use this local digital space to connect, we asked them, how often do you actually go there? And what we're looking at here is the percentage of people who say that they go weekly or more often to these spaces. And the first thing to note is that group text messages, Instagram, and WhatsApp are the three that are garnering a higher percentage of weekly or more frequent use, and a little bit less frequently for other types of platforms like Nextdoor or Reddit, especially among suburban and urban participants in our survey. But overall, there's an indication that there's at least half of people who are using many of these digital platforms to connect locally with others at least weekly. We next asked people a battery of questions about why it is that they use local digital spaces and whether they use local digital spaces for reasons like finding or sharing information about local events. When people said that they used a local digital space for these purposes, we then asked them to evaluate the local digital space. So how good of a job are these local digital spaces actually doing? And when we look at the scores here, overall, a pretty high percentage of people indicate that the local digital space that they use is doing a good job or an excellent job at a lot of these functions, like providing them a way to buy, sell, or give away items to people in their local areas or to find local recommendations. And so a takeaway from this is that, around 70, sometimes 80% of people in suburban, urban, or these mixed rural regions are actually giving pretty high marks to the local platforms that they have for these functions that we've examined here, which include everything from finding local recommendations to keeping up to date on local politics, that last one garnering the lowest level of evaluation. Here is what people said when we asked them, have you used a digital platform in the past year to do each of the following things? And people were most often using digital platforms to find or share information about local events. So this is our first indication that events are a really important component of why people are going to these local digital spaces. That was followed by buying, selling, or giving away items and finding local recommendations. Some of the categories that were less frequently indicated as why people use local digital spaces include some political reasons, such as discussing political events or working together to address a local problem. One other note that I want to point out here is it's interesting, and we found this particularly intriguing, that suburban, urban, and mixed rural tend to be pretty similar. And this is a pattern that we see repeated throughout our analysis. There's a lot of similarity across these regions in terms of what they're using digital platforms for, why they're doing that, and what they're getting out of it. So we have use. We know why people are using these. And then we were interested in how interested are people in using local digital platforms for these purposes. And so now we're showing you a chart that includes the percentage of people indicating that they were somewhat or very interested in using a digital platform to do each of these different items or actions. And the highest here is for suburban and urban residents is finding local recommendations. So around 2/3, and in some cases all the way up to 70% of people say that they are somewhat or very interested in finding local recommendations on these platforms. Next popular category is checking local public safety updates. And the third category of interest here is coordinating around local weather emergencies. One small difference here is that mixed and rural residents indicated that finding out and sharing information about local events was one of the categories most of interest to them. But overall, there's a lot of comparability across urban, suburban, and this mixed rural category in terms of what they're looking for. And there's a high level of interest for many of these categories. 2/3 or more of respondents are indicating an interest in using local digital platforms for a variety of different purposes. So we have why do they use it and how interested are they in it? And putting these two together is really revealing. It leads us to what we're calling an interest gap. So if we compare what percentage of people use it to what percentage of people are interested in it, the gap between these two reveals potential opportunities or potential issues that are needs that are being unmet. So on this next chart, this puts the two together. We're only going to show you the suburban one because of time constraints, but the deck we'll send out at the end also includes urban and mixed rural. And again, the patterns are not so different. So if you look at the first few here, you see that there's high levels of interest. So among our suburban respondents, they were interested in seeing recommendations, interested in public safety, interested in weather. And then the fascinating thing about this is the gap. So there's a lot of interest there, but not a lot of people are actually using a local digital platform for this reason. So around 45% of people use a local platform for recommendations, but over 70% say that they would be somewhat or very interested in doing this. So we read this as evidence of opportunity to help people find new spaces in order to satisfy these needs and these interests that they have in learning about their local community. We also asked people whether they had ever left a local digital space. And as you see across here, it varies between around 4 and 10 to around 5 and 10 of our respondents who had connected digitally with others have actually left a local digital space. So this already in itself is interesting. This indicates that there's some sort of churn in these spaces. Not everyone is going and staying forevermore. And the really fascinating thing about this is then we asked them to tell us why they left their local digital space. So we combed through all of these responses and categorized them. And I'm delighted to share with you what these reasons were. So the first reason that people said that they leave local digital spaces is because of a lack of interest or relevance. So people, you can see a couple of comments that were actually included in the data that we received. But this really cues to us that there's a utility component of being in these local groups. And if it's not meeting that utility function, people aren't interested in being part of it. The topics were uninteresting or irrelevant. The information wasn't useful. We see a lot of these words indicating utility. The second reason people were leaving local digital spaces was because of the extent of negativity, harassment, or scamming that they saw in these spaces. We had comments where people were saying that the post just got too crazy, or they were saying things like, it wasn't bringing any positivity into my life. Third category was spam notifications and annoying content led people to leave these local digital spaces. This included comments like too many emails, unnecessary information. The fourth most common theme we saw was disagreement or misalignment. So these were respondents who believed that their values weren't reflected in the space or that they were in disagreement with what was happening there, whether that's a value disagreement or they just didn't really like the content that was a part of that space. Examples here include people saying differences in values, group made me feel uncomfortable. More and more people were airing their political views. And then the final category we saw was that personal life changes motivated people to leave the group. So if people were moving or if their child was going to college and their school Facebook group was no longer relevant, this led them to leave these local digital spaces. So overall, I think that this gives us some insight in terms of where people go, in terms of the opportunities that exist there, and maybe some potential lessons of what to avoid in creating these local digital spaces. Okay, now on to our next major component of this. In the data, we were curious to know how it is that people evaluated these spaces and felt a sense of belonging or didn't feel a sense of belonging. And in the data, there's some indication that there's a relationship between how people feel about these spaces and this concept that we have called stewards. So New Public has been really inventive and really thinking about this idea of stewardship. And when you hear that, you may think to yourself, I am not quite sure what you mean by that. And that is totally okay. But think about it this way. So a lot of times in spaces online, you'll hear discussions about administrators or moderators. And these terms have a lot of meaning right now. They mean the people that are reviewing the content, the people that are making decisions about maybe limiting the circulation of a post or something like that. New Public is thinking about this in terms of stewards and really trying to think about this term because stewardship involves more than just a mechanical decision about whether you admit someone to your closed group or not. Steward involves the cultivation of a shared space where people are in conversation with one another, and the steward is a type of a host for this community. And so we were really interested in examining A, people's evaluations of these spaces, and B, whether there was any relationship between administrators, moderators, And although the public does not use the word steward yet, this concept of stewardship, of someone actually owning and taking an ownership and a host role for these spaces. So the first thing we did was ask people, is there at least one person who monitors the local digital space in which you find yourself, such as an administrator, moderator, or a steward? And just over half of people in each of our areas, so again, the similarity appears again in suburban, urban, and mixed rural areas, just over half said, yes, there is someone who's an administrator, a moderator, or a steward in the local digital space I use most often. Of those who said there was one, we said, can you name that person by memory? And here, just under half were able to name or believe that they would be able to name from memory who that administrator, moderator, or steward might happen to be. So overall, around a quarter of people are in a local digital space. Of those who say they are in local digital space, around a quarter of them say that they could name who that moderator is for that space. So then we asked people, okay, evaluate for us. Rate your experience in this digital space. We said do it from 0, which means extremely negative, all the way to 10, meaning extremely positive. And what we find are really middling ratings. So on average, these spaces are getting between a 7 and a 7.4 on average. If this is helpful for you to think in terms of stars, they're getting like a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I'm a faculty member, so I think this is in terms of grades. They're getting a C. So people feel kind of average about what's happening in these spaces. And what we wanted to know is in the data that we have, what correlated with evaluating this local digital space more positively. And lo and behold, one of the things that we found is that when there is an administrator, moderator, or steward, according to the respondent, they were more likely to evaluate the space more positively. Even more so if they could name that administrator, moderator, or steward, they were evaluating the space more positively. Now, the effects are small. It's not as though the second someone can name the moderator, all of a sudden the space is getting a 10 out of a 10. But there's something there. There's a correlation between this evaluation of local digital space and having some sort of an administrator, moderator, or steward there that people can name in particular. The next set of questions that we asked of our respondents was how they felt about belonging to this space. Did they feel like a member of it? Did they feel like they could trust other people in this space? And we asked 17 questions about this. This was a really important component that we wanted to get to. Turns out that all these questions are highly related to one another. An example question is something like, I feel like I'm part of a community when speaking about this local digital space. So for each of these questions, the response options went from 1, meaning I strongly disagree, to a 5, meaning strongly agree. And so we averaged all these together and we looked at what's the percentage of people that said a 4 or above on average. So this is somewhere between like somewhat agree and strongly agree. And the percentage of people that had that high of a level of belonging is low. So less than 20% of people indicated that they felt this strong sense of belonging to the local digital spaces that they were using most. So here we think is an indication of a lot of opportunity to create spaces that people do feel a sense of belonging in, that there's something there more than a raw transmission of information without any connection that's being built in these spaces. So we again looked, okay, what is it that predicts higher levels of belonging? Can we understand what leads people to feel more belonging in these spaces? And lo and behold, yet again, there are relationships, there's correlations between when people find an administrator, moderator, or steward in the space, they feel a greater sense of belonging. When they can name that person, they feel a greater sense of belonging. Now, these are correlations, no causation here, but it's at least a hint that there's something going on. Again, these effects are also small. It's not as though all of a sudden there's a moderator there and everyone is like, oh, I belong. But there's a relationship. There's something going on here that makes us want to lean in a bit. We also asked people about their willingness to act for a trustworthy local digital space. And we asked questions including, would you be willing to donate money to this local digital space? These questions were all included on the same page. And whenever you do that, the larger the dollar amount, the fewer people are willing to do that. But here what we find is in suburban areas, around 7% say that they would be willing to donate $10 per month. all the way up to 18.5% in mixed and rural regions. Fewer people say that they'd be willing to donate $20 per month, but still, if you multiply this out by the number of people that might be interested in a space like this and the signals of interest that we received earlier, there's potentially a market for doing some of this work. We also asked people whether they would be willing to receive payment for serving as a moderator, administrator, or steward for around 8 hours of work per week. And just shy of a third of participants found this to be a potentially interesting role that they might be interested in playing. We asked people if they would organize an event where people can meet in real life, and here between 20% and just over a quarter agreed that they would do that. So some signals here that people are interested in these spaces. So I'm keeping an eye on time and wanting to make sure that we have enough time for the variety of other things that we'll be discussing today. So I think I will stop there, but let me invite you to please look at the deck that will include the link there. There's a whole other section here and many more details about the methodology that I would encourage you to take a look at when you see the full deck. And of course, please feel welcome to get in touch at any point if you have questions about this. And I believe now I'm going to bring in Eli.
Hey, Talia.
Yay. And we'll talk about this. And as a reminder, if you have questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat. We'll incorporate those. If you're up for it, we'd love to spotlight you and you can ask your question live, but of course, leave that up to you. Hey, Eli.
Hello. Well, it's always been one of the great things about building New Public to have your empirical research brain helping guide us through these hard questions. This has been like so illuminating for us just to start to understand how neighborhoods are connecting across the country. I'm just going to start pulling in some questions from the chat. We had a few kind of like methodological ones. So did we have a sense of whether people were connecting via computers versus phones? Did we have any data on that?
Oh, great question. So we did ask people how they were connecting and I can just share very briefly the numbers here. A large percentage of participants across all the areas, more than 3/4, were using high-speed broadband at home. Around, I would say around 2/3, although a bit lower in the mixed and rural regions, were using a cellular data plan. And around a quarter were connecting at work. And then most people so 92% in suburban and urban were using a smart or cell phone, and around 89% in mixed rural regions were using a smart or cell phone. The next most common category is just over 50% using a laptop.
Great. Matthew Victor had a question about news. Matthew, do you want to actually ask your question? If you do, just jump off mute.
Yeah, sure. So the survey, it seemed like the respondents said that they rated their satisfaction with the digital spaces that they encounter and are part of. But I was wondering, what is the benchmark that they're comparing that to? Like, there aren't a lot of options out there.
Yeah, what a great question. And we don't know from the survey what the benchmark is. So they were only asked to rate their local digital space that they're using most frequently without saying, like, how does it compare to other things that you might use? And I think part of the rationale for that is exactly what you're getting into. There's not much comparison out there, right? Like if you want to connect locally, maybe there would be an in-person alternative, but I think a lot of times now, even those in-person alternatives are mediated. So you end up at an in-person event because of something you saw online. And so I think in many ways, it's the same way, I assign grades to my students based on the performance just in that class. We're asking them to assign grades to their local digital space just based on that in isolation. But it would be fascinating to think about what benchmarks might be in which communities.
Micah asked a question about demographic information. Micah, do you want to share your question? Well, I'll jump in. And we don't want to put everyone on the spot, but it's fun to hear your voices if you want. So, but this was a question about sort of what do we know about the respondents in terms of age, race, ethnicity, religion, political orientation, and do we see anything interesting there? I would add.
Amazing. Okay. Rather than read all sorts of fun numbers, I'm going to just share my screen again really quickly so that you can get a sense of the demographic attributes of the sample. So here you can see the demographics. This will also be in the slide deck that's shared afterward. As with all samples, it is not a perfect reflection of the community. However, we did use weighting based on census data and other data sources to try to make this as representative as possible. So know that we did that on the back end, and we tried very hard to recruit people who from a diverse range of backgrounds in order to participate in this study. And then interesting things, one of the things that I found most interesting was how little these demographic attributes explained of what people thought about their digital space, of their sense of belonging. These were not attributes that really explained a ton of what was happening in people's sense of belonging or how they were evaluating their digital space, which I find to be kind of a fascinating component of this work. That's not the main driver, is demographics.
Totally agreed also on that being a surprising and interesting effect. And just bridging on that, Lori Melchar asked about sort of you had said that you were surprised by the degree to which the results were consistent across different kinds of like types of communities. How did you think that they might be different, or was there something you were hypothesizing or imagining that they might differ?
Yeah, what a great question. So this is probably going to show so many biases. It's terrible. But I think that when I thought about how someone from a suburban area might orient toward their local digital space, because they have perhaps, my naive assumption would be they would have more connections, perhaps they were chatting with each other more often. Maybe they're in their neighborhood, perhaps then they have some sense of connection that you might not need these local digital spaces in the same way. That certainly didn't appear in the data at all. My assumption would be that rural communities might also have other things in place, but might really value these local communities for things like events. That does bear out a little bit, but suburban communities are interested in events as well. These urban areas are interested in events as well. And I think there was some notion that perhaps there would be different platforms in urban areas, that these platforms tend to roll out more quickly in urban areas and then kind of trickle down. And we did not see any evidence of that either. To me, there were a bunch of surprises that that just wasn't the driver of difference in what people found of interest and how people were using these spaces.
Totally. Wanted to go to Cynthia, who had a question about sort of local events versus local recommendations. Cynthia, do you want to ask that question?
Yeah, I was just curious, like how you categorize or define the learning about local events and getting local recommendations, because that was the key difference in insight between the most popular choices between I remember the suburban slash urban and the mixed rural, right?
Yeah, so literally what we ask people is how interested would you be in using a digital platform to find local recommendations? And then we said, how interested would you be in using a local digital platform to find or share information about local events? So we didn't provide any other insight beyond that. My sense in terms of some of the other research that has been done on this is when people think events, they literally think about like, what's the date and the time of the thing happening somewhere else. And I think they tend to think about recommendations more as I need someone to help with this moving my couch or something like that. And I think that I would use some caution in comparing these because the samples are a bit different. And I would say that more of the takeaway I would take from that is not like, wow, there's this difference between mixed rural and the other. I would instead take away the insight that it's actually pretty high for both, that people are really interested in learning more about recommendations from their local area. And although it's slightly less for suburban and urban areas in terms of their interested in events, it's still pretty high. And the same is true in the opposite way for those in mixed rural regions.
I'm really interested. I want to go to this interest gap between how people currently use the spaces and how they want to use them. And how do you think about like what might explain those gaps? What factors might be part of that based on this research?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is that people don't have access or don't know about local platforms that would allow them to satisfy these needs. So it might be the case that you're in an area where there actually isn't a very robust Facebook group. Maybe there is a local next door, but maybe it's including content from other areas. And so I think some of these interest gaps are occurring because that actually is not available in their area. There's no robust space that's already been created, that's already vibrant, that they can go to satisfy these interests. And so I think that for me is what indicates that there's some opportunity here, that people are interested in it, but they haven't yet found a place that's, scratching that itch, for lack of a better way to say that.
Yeah. And we saw some signs that stewardship helps, but they were also relatively like small effects. Like what does that make you think about sort of the impact of stewardship, the factors that might contribute to it, and could things be different if stewardship were more central to the experience of being part of these groups?
I think that is potentially an explanation for what's happening here, right? We've probably all been part of a community where we have an amazing steward, and we've probably all been part of a community, whether it's online or offline, where we're like, this could go better. And, we just ask really blunt measures. Is there one there? And do you know their name? So I think there's a lot more finesse and a lot more fine-grained components to this that we could suss out to understand exactly what is the experience like of stewardship there. And I suspect we would find quite a bit of variability in terms of the experience of stewardship and how people relate to that could help to better explain people's experiences. So I think
Yeah.
that's worth investigating more. Obviously, from this data, we can't tell that, and it's only correlational. So there's like a hint of something there, but I think it opens the door to so many additional investigations to really pin down what is good stewardship. And I think that this is a signal that it's worth doing that.
Yeah, and I'm seeing in the chat. I mean, I know we have a number of stewards present and past here. People who have done it on Nextdoor, on Reddit, on WhatsApp. My own personal neighborhood steward is here, and I think different platforms sort of permit different levels of active stewardship. And one of the things that we've certainly heard a lot in our research at New Public about Facebook, for example, is like stewards are constantly battling with the algorithm that wants to highlight, different things than the stewards might want to highlight from the community. And so the thread where everyone's like arguing about something gets a lot more traction than like, one of the threads that they really want people to see.
Yeah, definitely a blend of the technology and the person.
Great. I'm going to take a few more questions. Let's see. Diane had a great question. Diane Sylvester, do you want to ask your question about in-group and out-group issues?
Sort of when you raised the point about sort of discoverability and people sort of knowing or not knowing it brought to mind a concern that comes up a lot, which is in-group versus out-group, and how people can gain knowledge of these spaces. Like they could be existing, but the people that aren't there for particular reasons, right? Did any part of your study get into any of that, or is that next stage or third stage look?
Yeah, such a great question. So one thing we did ask people is who they heard from in these spaces, which is not exactly the same as who gets in, and it's definitely a perception of who people think are in these spaces. And when we ask that, it's definitely the case that people are saying they hear more from women than from men. They hear more from middle-aged people than those that are younger or older. And around between a third and 40% said they hear from people with racial or ethnic backgrounds different from their own. We did also ask people whether or not they believe they heard from people with different socioeconomic statuses than their own. And in this case, a pretty significant percentage of people, so right under a fourth of people, said they actually had no idea. And so I think that this does speak a bit to your question that there are gaps in who's there and who knows about them. And people aren't always recognizing that those gaps are there when they are in these spaces. And I think that represents just an opportunity for how do we make sure that these sorts of spaces can be more representative of the communities that they're attempting to serve to the extent that that's their mission.
Awesome. um, and maybe as a final question, just coming back to methodologies, do you want to address Tara's question in the chat about sort of how we selected participants or how we found people?
If you would not mind, how did you
Oh,
select
sorry.
participants
Yes.
for this? I see it there.
So
Really great question. So for the urban and suburban participants, we worked with a survey research firm called SSRS, and they use probability sampling to recruit people. So they use the list of addresses, which covers, I think, around 97% of the United States. And then they looked at those that were in regions that were urban or suburban and drew a random sample of people from those regions. So those truly are probability samples designed to be representative of those regions. For the non-probability sample, which was our mixed and rural regions, for that one, we had to use non-probability samples. So we worked to find anyone in those communities who had signed up to participate in surveys across multiple different vendors, because it's kind of a tough geographic area to get a hold of people. And you can see the areas in the full slide deck. We've highlighted them on maps, so you can see actually where we were surveying people. And that one, budget-wise, you have to carefully balance all of those things, and we did the best we could with that. But the first two are probability samples, and for all of them, we worked with the survey firm to weight the data to try to be as representative as possible. But a really great question.
great. All right. Well, I know we could all keep asking questions for quite a while, and if folks have questions, please do, let us know in the chat or reach out by email or on social, and we'll try to get your questions answered. There's more to this data than even what's in the full deck. I think Josh is also going to share in the chat the deck link, so you'll have that. You're welcome to share that with other people, and that has a lot of additional information. But now, we are not just dispassionately interested in this question. We've actually been working on some potential, sort of solutions, experiments in this area. And I want to bring in Trey Brundrett, who has been leading our local lab team to actually build something for that interest gap. And he's going to give the first ever world sneak preview of what we've been building. Trey, over to you.
Howdy, y'all. Thank you for joining this, and I'm excited to be here to share what we've been working on. I got to start off by saying it is just a real pleasure to be here with Talia and other researchers on our team. New Public is an incredible place to do this type of work because of this phenomenal research. In fact, I think wouldn't be possible without this research. And so it's informed a lot of what we've done. And I should also say that, because one of our values is, sort of working in public and sharing and collaborating with other folks in the field, a lot of the research that y'all have done and shared, I'm sure there's folks that are on this call that we've tapped into your research. I think Andrew's here from Civic News has done some really great research around information gaps. Thank you for that, and thank you for sharing that so that we can all collaborate and learn and be building together. But I'm here because of this work, and it's what really informs what we're doing. Let's get into it. I'm going to share and we will talk about what we've been building. All right. So what we're working on, based off of, I think this is, not only the research that has been done at New Public, but the local lab at New Public was doing a lot of research and development well before I arrived in March, and really thinking, working with local stewards in these online spaces, and figuring out, how do we better support that? What are the signals that we're seeing? And where we have landed is that, we really think there's an opportunity to create a new way to build a product that is a way for you to bring your town or neighborhood together online without the noise or toxicity of what is available today from big social media platforms and technology platforms. And we think that actually creating a surface area for experimenting with some of the lessons learned around more pro-social techniques and from the research of like what people actually want and need, where these gaps are, that we can create something new and compelling. So what we think is that there is this opportunity really to build something with the people in these communities. We heard that they're hungry for something new and different and better, that allows them to kind of find the local relevant information that they need to be able to share that with each other, to be able to connect with each other, and really to be able to thrive in their local community. And oftentimes that means using a product like this, and a platform like this, not just to spend the time talking to each other online, but to find the information and the events and the connections they need to go offline and connect with each other in their community. So that's a big part of what we're thinking about as well. Here's the big reveal. It is called Roundabout. And that's the platform that it's the name of the platform that we're currently building. We are close to launching this in kind of in a closed beta way with some of our pilot communities that I'll tell you more about. First of all, I just want to shout out our team. We have an incredible team of folks. I think what's exciting at New Public is, we get to work with, we are, designers and engineers and researchers and community organizers. Many of us have experience in big tech or in media, and we're excited to be building something with communities that we think can have a real impact in these communities, hopefully increase belonging and social trust, but also just be a really great, valuable tool and utility for folks in their local communities. And we're lucky to have a great group of folks who every day wake up thinking about this. It's an amazing team that I'm extremely lucky to be a part of, and super privileged to share what they've been working on. So we're piloting this new product in 5 communities: Chattanooga, Tennessee; Richmond, Virginia; Lincoln County, Wisconsin; Conestoga Valley in PA; and Burlington, North Carolina. The key here is for us is really important value that New Public has built and focused on and practiced, which is really about co-design. Working with the stewards, with the community members in these places, to build this new product and this new platform. And I think what's exciting is that this is a product that is, as you've heard, it's based on the research that we've done. That we have a big belief in, that there's an opportunity, a real power in how we can really enable stewards in their local communities to really drive not only what the product is, but how these online spaces can be really healthy and exciting and fun places to engage with your fellow community members. So in each of these communities, we are working with stewards who answered an open call that we made to work with us as we build an MVP product and test it out and learn and experiment with ways that we think we can provide something valuable. So I'll tell you a little bit about the product. This, you can see some screenshots from the product as we've been currently building it. And I'll tell you about a few of the ideas here. And I'll just say, as I go through this, you'll hear me say this a lot, and it's just true, is so much of this is informed by research that New Public has done and research that we've heard from around the field. So first of all, I think this idea of how stewards are more visible and how they show up and set the tone for the community. One of the ideas that we have is that the sort of the home screen is something that is actually curated by these local stewards. So what they're doing is able to sort of welcome people to the space, update that on a regular basis, share photo from their local community, kind of a local flavor, but also be able to highlight the best of the posts that maybe the most relevant or most interesting or, something that's important, today to know. They're able to sort of take those posts and highlight them in this homepage environment and make it something that every day you show up and you can quickly kind of get a sense of what's happening here. What do I need to know about? What's a cool event? What's a way to start participating in the space? Another idea is really, again, organized around, based off of our research, is how do we help people know what this space is purpose-built for? What are the channels of information that, we are hoping that we can provide here, that you can find, that you can participate in, that you can contribute to, that we create this sort of the conditions for participation around these specific areas. We have several channels that are going to be set across all of our communities and some that the stewards are selecting. There'll be kind of a main feed where your posts are made and replies, but you can kind of drop into these very specific channels. Some examples of this are people and lore, where it's, stories of the people in your community interviewing people who, maybe work at the food bank or at your community garden, or your postman that's retiring, whatever it is, but also like the culture and the stories of the space. Another example that you saw in the research that's very important is help and recommendations. People are they're asking for help, they're looking for recommendations. We want to create a really vibrant and robust space for being able to feel safe and to ask for that and to get really good information back. Part of that is also related to this idea of guides. So we think there's a really cool opportunity to allow the community to come together to build guides that are valuable resources to other people in the community. We're going to make it possible for the steward to sort of prompt the community about a particular topic. That might be as simple as what are the best, parks to take your kids, or it may be, hey, how do I help take care of my neighbors? It's going to be hot this summer. What are the best resources that I can connect people to, maybe older folks in my neighborhood that I want to make sure, aren't hurt by the heat. So we can ask that question of the community, they can participate, and then we can build these guides that can be easily shared. And then another big component of this is, you saw that there's always a lot of interest in what can I do in my community? That's borne out by the research. Every time you ask about it, people say they want to know what's happening in their community. We think that there's an opportunity here to use, instead of just kind of, here's a bunch of list of events, we actually drive the calendar by what people are talking about with each other. What are they sharing with each other of, here's an event you can go to, here's an event that I went to, and here's some photos from it. We think the job to be done here is not necessarily managing events or handling RSVPs, but instead just discovery, finding events that are relevant to you. And if you're hosting an event, another place to be able to promote it so that you get more people to take part in it. So these are just a few of the ideas that we're going to be experimenting with and learning about. It's based off of the research that we've been doing, and we're going to continue to learn and share with people as we build these out and work in our local communities. And we're excited to share what we learn as we go along. how these hypotheses like sort of play out in terms of what we learn. I just want to, end here and just say that, it's probably the most, a fun part of this work is working with these stewards in these local communities. We're a team that is building a digital product, but the other thing we're doing is really learning how we can best support community stewards in their local communities, not only to just operate in these spaces and give them good tools for moderation and for sharing information and all of that, but also how to bring people in, how to kind of folks who are not interested in being on these big tech platforms anymore. How do we help them know about something new and really participate in the barn raising of standing up these new communities together? And so, one of the fun things that we've seen is how stewards are reaching out to people in their communities. A part of our team is focused on working very closely with those folks and learning. And so I think there's a lot to share from that as well. At the end of the day, we're trying to build something that is a product that people love, that they want to be using, that provides a lot of value to them and really helps them to be more engaged in their local community. So that's a digital product is not just enough for that. We also have to think of the practices and the way that we engage in the community. Like I said, we think our approach to co-design with stewards and community members will help us to get there.
Thanks, Trey.
That's roundabout.
Yeah, and thanks. So excited to learn in public about this with all of you. We're starting out, small in these 5 places. We'll be growing. If you're excited about being part of this, you can sign up to, be part of this next wave as we learn in practice inside this like mission-driven nonprofit container where we don't have to worry about being corrupted by the pressures of venture capital, and that's what we're aiming to do. I'll just say quickly because I know we're right at time. We are looking for people. So if you know great local leaders or local organizations who can help us identify stewards, send them to joinroundabout.com, and we would love to know about them. We are looking for money. We are a 501c3, and we've got some donors who have matched donations up to $500,000 through the end of the year. So if you know someone who's excited about this area of work, we would love to talk to them. And then really, the purpose of this is to share these ideas, share the research, and stay engaged with each other. We think communities are how we move forward in this era, and we're very lucky to have you all in our community. Feel free to share the deck and stay in touch with us at our newsletter that's at the top of newpublic.org. And so I'll just close with a big thank you to you all, to Trey and Talia and the Center for Media Engagement at UT Austin, and the funders who made the work possible, our friends at the Trust for Civic Life who helped us identify the regions and gave us feedback on the survey. Thank you all. I know there's more questions and we'll try to get to those another way, but really appreciate everybody's time and energy.
Thank you so much for organizing.